There are moments in life when you suddenly realize you've become invisible. Not literally, of course, but invisible in the ways that matter. When people look through you instead of at you, when your presence becomes something to be managed rather than celebrated. When you understand, with painful clarity, that you're no longer essential to the people who were once your entire world. For me, that moment came on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life, my only son's wedding day. My name is Richard Walsh. I'm 69 years old, a retired high school English teacher, and I've spent the last 8 years as a widower after my wife Helen died suddenly of a heart attack. Jason is our only child, the boy we poured everything into, the young man I raised alone through his teenage years after Helen passed. And today, at his wedding to Clarissa Montgomery, I learned that I had somehow become nothing more than an inconvenience to be tolerated. It started 6 months ago when Jason announced his engagement. I was thrilled, naturally. Clarissa seemed nice enough the few times I'd met her, though there was always something in the way she looked at my modest 3-bedroom house that made me feel inadequate. She came from money, serious money. Her father, Charles Montgomery, owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across the Pacific Northwest, and her mother Victoria came from Old Portland wealth. Their world was country clubs and charity galas and vacation homes in Aspen. My world was grading papers and mowing my own lawn and shopping at Costco. But I told myself that didn't matter. Jason loved her, and that was enough. Love bridges gaps, right? That's what I'd always taught my students in the romantic literature units. Love conquers all. I was naive enough to believe it. The warning signs started early, but I ignored them. When Jason first told me about the engagement, he mentioned they were thinking of a small, intimate ceremony. Within 2 weeks, that had ballooned to 200 guests. When I asked if I could help with anything, Jason said, "Clarissa's mom has it all under control. She's kind of taking the lead on planning since she's done this before." Victoria had planned her daughter's sister's wedding 3 years earlier, apparently, and it had been featured in Portland Luxury magazine. This wedding would be even better. I wasn't invited to a single planning meeting. Not one. When I asked Jason about dates, venues, themes, he'd give me vague answers. "It's all handled, Dad. Don't worry about it." When I offered to contribute financially, he looked uncomfortable. "The Montgomerys are covering everything. It's important to Clarissa that her parents do this." When I asked if I could at least see the venue, he said, "It's at Clarissa's parents' estate. You'll see it on the day. It's going to be amazing." I should have pushed harder. I should have insisted on being included. But I didn't want to seem demanding or difficult. I didn't want to be the burden of a father who couldn't keep up with the Montgomerys' wealth and sophistication. So I stayed quiet and told myself it was fine. My role was just to show up, walk my son down the aisle if asked, and be happy for him, except I wasn't asked to walk him down the aisle. I found that out 3 weeks before the wedding when I called Jason to ask about rehearsal details. "Oh, Dad, I meant to tell you. We're not doing a traditional processional. Clarissa wants us both to walk in from opposite sides with our parents, so she'll come in with Charles and Victoria, and I'll just walk in by myself from the groom's side. It's more modern, more equal. Except it wasn't equal at all. Clarissa got both her parents. Jason got no one. I offered to walk with him, but he said, "Nah, it's fine. It's just a walk. Not a big deal." Not a big deal. Walking your son to meet his bride, one of the few meaningful roles a father has at a wedding, was not a big deal. I called my brother Earl in Seattle that night and told him what was happening. Earl, who'd never sugar-coated anything in his 72 years, said, "Ricky, you're being pushed out. Open your eyes. That girl and her family are erasing you from your own son's life, and he's letting them do it. That's not fair," I protested. "Jason loves me. He's just trying to keep the peace with his fiancé's family. You know how wedding planning can be stressful?" "Yeah, I do. I've been married 3 times, remember? And you know what all 3 of my wives did? They included me in planning my own kids' weddings. They treated me like I mattered. This girl and her people are treating you like you're an embarrassment they have to hide." I hung up angry at Earl for saying it, but angrier at myself because I knew he was right. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received my invitation in the mail. An actual engraved invitation, formal and expensive looking, addressed to Mr. Richard Walsh, not Dad or father of the groom or even Richard Walsh and guest, just my name. Alone, like I was a distant relative who'd been invited out of obligation. I opened it and read the details. Saturday, June 15th, 4 o'clock ceremony at the Montgomery estate. Reception to follow. Black tie optional. Black tie optional. I didn't own a tuxedo. I'd worn a suit to my own wedding 40 years ago, and that same suit, updated with a new tie, had served me fine for every formal occasion since. But black tie optional meant I needed to rent a tux. I couldn't show up in a regular suit and be the only man there looking underdressed. So I went to Men's Warehouse and spent $300. I couldn't really afford to rent a tuxedo for one night. The week before the wedding, I tried one more time to connect with Jason. I drove to his apartment, the nice one-bedroom in the Pearl District that he could barely afford on his marketing manager salary. Though I suspected the Montgomerys were helping with rent. He seemed surprised to see me. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you. We haven't really talked in weeks. I thought maybe we could grab dinner, just the two of us. Father-son time before your big day." He looked uncomfortable. "Tonight's not great. Clarissa and I have a tasting appointment with the caterer. Final menu decisions. It's been scheduled for months." "Oh, well, what about tomorrow? Or any night this week?" "It's just crazy right now, Dad. You know how it is the week before a wedding. So much to do. So many last-minute details. So many details that his father couldn't be part of, apparently." I stood there in his doorway, this boy I'd raised alone through half of his childhood, and felt like a stranger. "Jason, am I doing something wrong? Have I upset you or Clarissa somehow? I feel like I'm being kept at arm's length." "What?" "No, Dad, don't be ridiculous. Everything's fine. It's just busy. I promise we'll spend time together after the wedding, after the honeymoon. Things will calm down and get back to normal." But I was beginning to suspect that normal was exactly what worried me. This was the new normal. Me on the outside, the Montgomerys on the inside, and Jason caught in the middle but clearly choosing their side. I went home that night and did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out the old photo albums from the closet, the ones Helen had meticulously maintained before she died. Pictures of Jason as a baby, as a toddler learning to walk with me holding his hands, as a gap-toothed 6-year-old on his first day of school. Birthday parties I'd organized. Christmas mornings where we'd wake up early and make pancakes before opening presents. His high school graduation where he'd thanked me in his speech for being the best dad anyone could ask for. When had I stopped being the best dad anyone could ask for? When had I become someone to be managed and minimized? I found our wedding photo, Helen and me on the church steps, both of us so young and full of hope. Her family hadn't had much money either. It had been a simple ceremony at St. Mary's with a reception in the church basement. Folding tables with white tablecloths, a sheet cake from Costco, a DJ who played too much Bee Gees. But it had been perfect because everyone there loved us and wanted to celebrate with us. I'd felt surrounded by family and friends, by people who mattered to us and to whom we mattered. I wondered if Jason would feel that way at his wedding. Surrounded by 200 of the Montgomerys' friends and business associates and society connections. Would he feel loved, or would he feel like a prop in their expensive production? The day before the wedding, I received a phone call from someone named Gabriel who introduced herself as Victoria Montgomery's personal assistant and wedding coordinator. Her voice was crisp, professional, and slightly condescending, like she was used to dealing with people who needed very specific instructions. "Mr. Walsh, I'm calling to go over some important details for tomorrow. First, the ceremony begins promptly at 4 o'clock. Please arrive no later than 3:30. You'll be directed to the groom's holding area where you can wait until the ceremony begins. Second, there will be a receiving line after the ceremony, but it will only include the bride, groom, and the bride's parents. You'll proceed directly to the cocktail hour. Third, dinner is a plated meal with assigned seating. You're at table 18. And finally, there will be speeches during dinner. The bride's father will give the first toast, followed by the best man and maid of honor. That's the order Mrs. Montgomery has approved." I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, trying to process what I'd just heard. "I'm sorry, what about the father of the groom toast?" "I've prepared some remarks." There was a brief, "But I'm his father." "Traditionally, the father of the groom speaks at his son's wedding." "I understand, but Mrs. Montgomery has been very specific about keeping the speeches concise. Too many speakers makes the evening drag on. I'm sure you understand. Is there anything else I can help clarify?" My hands were shaking. "Can I speak with Jason about this?" "Mr. Walsh, tomorrow is going to be very busy for the bride and groom. I'd suggest not bothering them with last-minute changes. Everything has been planned and coordinated. I'm sure you want the day to go smoothly for your son." The implicit threat was clear. "Don't make trouble. Don't be difficult. Don't ruin Jason's big day by insisting on being included. I thanked her, and hung up feeling sick to my stomach. I'd spent 2 weeks working on that speech. I'd written and rewritten it, practiced it in front of the mirror, timed it to make sure it was the perfect length. I'd planned to talk about Jason as a boy, about Helen and how proud she would be, about welcoming Clarissa into our family. I'd worked so hard to make it meaningful, to use my skills as an English teacher to craft something beautiful and heartfelt. And I'd been cut from the program without even being told directly. A personal assistant had delivered the news like she was informing me of parking arrangements. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about Table 18. I'd looked up the typical wedding seating arrangements online. The parents of the bride and groom traditionally sat at a head table or at the very least at tables near the front, close to the newlyweds. Table 18 suggested I'd be in the back, far from Jason, seated with people I probably didn't know. I was being hidden away like an embarrassment. At 2:30 the next afternoon, I put on my rented tuxedo. It fit well enough, though I felt like I was playing dress-up in someone else's costume. I looked at myself in the mirror, a 69-year-old man with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes, wearing an expensive tuxedo to attend a wedding where he wasn't really wanted. I thought about Helen. If she were alive, would this be happening? Would the Montgomerys dare to treat me this way if I had a wife by my side? Another person to validate my existence? I drove to the Montgomery estate, a sprawling property in the West Hills with gates and a long driveway lined with mature trees. A valet took my 15-year-old Honda Civic with barely concealed disdain, probably used to parking BMWs and Mercedes. I walked toward the house, following signs that directed guests to the garden ceremony area. The setup was stunning, I had to admit. White chairs arranged in perfect rows on an immaculate lawn, an elaborate floral arch at the front where Jason and Clarissa would exchange vows, a string quartet playing classical music, elegantly dressed guests milling about with champagne glasses, laughing and chatting. This was a different world from anything I'd ever experienced. I tried to find someone I knew. Jason's college roommate Dave was supposed to be the best man, but I didn't see him anywhere. I recognized a few distant relatives, some cousins on Helen's side I hadn't seen in years, but they were already seated and didn't notice me. Everyone else seemed to know each other, part of the Montgomery social circle. I was a stranger at my own son's wedding. A young woman with a clipboard approached me. Name? Richard Walsh, father of the groom. She scanned her list. Oh, Mr. Walsh, you're supposed to be in the groom's holding area. That's in the west wing of the house. I'll have someone escort you. She gestured to another young woman, maybe another of Victoria's assistants, who led me through a side entrance of the massive house. We walked down hallways lined with expensive art, past rooms that looked like they belonged in design magazines, until we reached a small sitting room where Jason stood alone, adjusting his bow tie in a mirror. Dad! He turned, startled. You're here, early. That's good. Great. You look good in a tux. Thanks. You look very handsome. And he did. My son, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his hair styled professionally, looking more adult and polished than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, I saw him as the little boy who used to jump into my arms when I came home from work. Where had that boy gone? Big day, I said, trying to keep my voice light. How are you feeling? Nervous, excited, terrified. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Mostly just ready for it to be done, you know? All this planning and stress. It'll be nice when it's just done. Are you happy, Jason? Really happy? He looked at me strangely. Of course I am. Why would you ask that? I just want to make sure. Marriage is a big step. You're committing your life to someone. I want you to be certain this is what you want. Dad, I'm marrying Clarissa. She's amazing. Her family is amazing. This is everything I've ever wanted. So yes, I'm happy. Everything he'd ever wanted. Interesting that he emphasized the Montgomerys, their money, their status, as part of that happiness. But I didn't say anything. This wasn't the time. I wanted to talk to you about my speech. I started. I got a call from Victoria's assistant saying I wasn't on the program. I thought maybe there was a misunderstanding. Jason's face flushed. Oh, yeah, about that. Dad, don't take this the wrong way, but Victoria thought it would be better to keep the speeches short. Charles is going to toast, and then Dave, and then Clarissa's sister Emma. That's already 3 people. If we add more, it gets to be too much. But I'm your father. I know. And you'll be at the head table with us. He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. Actually, I'm at table 18, I said quietly. According to the seating chart I was sent. His face went from flushed to pale. What? That can't be right. Let me check on that. Jason, tell me the truth. Did you want me at this wedding at all? Or am I just here because it would look bad if the groom's father didn't show up? Dad, that's not fair. Of course I want you here. You're my father. It's just, Clarissa's family has certain expectations. They're paying for everything, and Victoria has a very specific vision. I'm trying to keep everyone happy, but you're not keeping me happy. You're not even considering what I might want or feel. I'm being treated like a distant relative who has to be accommodated, not like your father who raised you, who sat with you through every illness and every heartbreak, who worked double shifts grading papers so we could afford your college application fees. I know, Dad. I know everything you did for me, and I appreciate it. I do. But this one day, can you just not make waves? Can you just let it be Clarissa's day without creating drama? Creating drama. That's what I was doing by wanting to be included in my son's wedding. That's what I had become, a source of potential drama that needed to be managed. Before I could respond, the door opened and Victoria Montgomery swept in. She was an elegant woman in her early 60s, wearing a lavender dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her eyes landed on me with something that looked like mild annoyance. Jason, darling, we need you for photos in 5 minutes. The photographer wants some shots of you and Clarissa separately before the ceremony. And Mr. Walsh, you should probably head to your seat. The ceremony will be starting soon. Mother Victoria was just... Jason started, but she cut him off. I'm sure whatever it was can wait until after the ceremony. Jason, come, now. We're on a tight schedule. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Walsh, so lovely that you could join us today. I hope you enjoy the ceremony. Join us. Like I was a guest, not family. She ushered Jason out of the room, leaving me standing there alone, dismissed like a servant who'd overstayed his welcome. I walked back outside and found my seat. Row 12, aisle seat. The seats in front of me were already filling up. I recognized some faces, business associates of Charles Montgomery based on their conversations about real estate and investments. Nobody I knew, nobody who knew Jason before Clarissa came into his life. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's Canon. Everyone stood. From the far side of the garden, Clarissa appeared with both her parents, looking radiant in a dress that probably cost more than my car. They walked slowly down the aisle, Victoria crying delicately, Charles beaming with pride. They reached the front, and the three of them embraced while the photographer captured every moment. Then, from the opposite side, Jason appeared, alone, walking by himself to meet his bride. No father beside him, no mother's memory represented. Just a groom walking alone because his new family had decided his old family didn't fit their aesthetic. I stood there with everyone else, watching my son, my only child, get married without me by his side, and I felt tears running down my face. Not happy tears. Tears of grief for everything I was losing and everything I'd already lost. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I suppose. The officiant spoke about love and commitment. Jason and Clarissa exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Nothing about family, nothing about heritage, just flowery words about soulmates and destiny. They exchanged rings. They kissed. Everyone applauded. And then, as Gabrielle had told me, there was a receiving line. But not for me. Charles and Victoria stood with Jason and Clarissa, greeting guests, accepting congratulations. I stood to the side, watching, until another coordinator ushered me toward the cocktail area. Reception's this way, sir. The bride and groom will join shortly. I was being herded away from my own son, so the important people, the Montgomerys and their friends, could have their moment. The cocktail hour was held on another section of the vast Montgomery property, a terrace overlooking manicured gardens with a view of the city in the distance. Waiters in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. Everything was perfect, expensive, and completely foreign to me. I stood near the edge of the terrace, holding a glass of champagne I didn't want, watching groups of people laugh and chat. They all seemed to know each other. The women wore designer dresses and real jewelry. The men discussed golf handicaps and stock portfolios. I caught fragments of conversation, talk about summer homes in the San Juans, about upcoming charity galas, about whose children were attending which prestigious universities. Nobody approached me. Nobody introduced themselves. I was invisible in my rented tuxedo, a ghost haunting the periphery of my son's wedding. After about 20 minutes, I saw Earl making his way through the crowd toward me. My brother, 3 years older than me, looked uncomfortable in his suit, but relieved to see a familiar face.
Jesus Christ, Ricky, what the hell kind of wedding is this?
I've been to state dinners that were less formal. Earl, thank God. I was starting to think I was the only person here who wasn't a millionaire. You might be. I just overheard someone talking about their yacht. Their yacht, Ricky. Who the hell owns a yacht in Portland? He grabbed a champagne glass from a passing waiter and downed it in one gulp. Where's Jason? I haven't seen him since the ceremony. Still in the receiving line with Clarissa and her parents, I assume. Taking photos. Being congratulated by people who matter. Earl studied my face. You look like hell. What happened? I told him. About being excluded from planning. About the seating arrangement. About my speech being cut. About Jason walking down the aisle alone rather than with me. About being dismissed from the groom's holding room like I was an inconvenience. Earl's face grew darker with each detail. That son of a bitch, he finally said. Not Jason, though he's not off the hook either. But that woman, Victoria, she's systematically erasing you from your own son's life. And Jason's letting it happen because he's dazzled by their money and their connections. He loves Clarissa. That's what matters. Does he? Or does he love what Clarissa represents? The lifestyle, the status, the escape from being the son of a high school teacher from a modest background. Earl shook his head. I love you, brother, but you raised that boy to think money doesn't matter. And now he's learned it does matter. And he's embarrassed by where he came from. His words stung because they rang true. Jason had always been sensitive about money growing up. When his friends got new cars at 16, he'd driven my old Honda. When they went on spring break trips to Mexico, he'd worked at the local grocery store. When they wore designer clothes, he'd shopped at Target. I'd thought I was teaching him good values. That happiness doesn't come from material things. That hard work and education matter more than wealth. But maybe I just made him feel poor and resentful. There you are. A voice called out, and I turned to see Dave, Jason's best man, approaching with a drink in hand. He was a nice kid, now a nice 30-something man, who'd roomed with Jason at University of Oregon.
Mr. Walsh,
I've been looking for you. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Dave. Congratulations on being best man. I'm sure you'll give a great speech. He made a face. Yeah, about that. Did Jason tell you they basically wrote my speech for me? Victoria handed me an index card with approved talking points. Nothing too personal, nothing that might not fit the tone. I feel like a trained monkey. At least you get to speak, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. I was cut from the program entirely. Dave's eyes widened. What? That's insane. You're his father. How can there not be a father of the groom toast? Apparently too many speakers would make the evening drag on. That's bullshit. I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, but that's complete bullshit. Jason should have insisted. I would have given up my spot for you in a heartbeat. You're way more important than I am. His indignation on my behalf made me feel slightly better, but it also highlighted how wrong this all was. Even Jason's best friend could see it. Why couldn't Jason? A coordinator with a clipboard appeared, announcing that dinner was being served and guests should proceed to the reception tent. We followed the crowd to an enormous white tent that had been erected on yet another section of the property. Inside it looked like something from a wedding magazine. Crystal chandeliers hung from the tent ceiling. Round tables covered in ivory linens were set with fine china and elaborate centerpieces of white roses and orchids. A dance floor dominated the center, surrounded by tables arranged in careful hierarchy. I found table 18. It was, as I'd suspected, at the very back of the tent, as far from the head table as possible while still technically being inside the same structure. My table mates were already seated, 3 couples I didn't recognize who were deep in conversation about something that had happened at their country club. They glanced at me briefly as I sat down, offered polite smiles, and went back to their discussion. Earl had been seated at table 16, 2 tables over but still in the back section. He caught my eye and shook his head in disgust. We were the groom's only family present, his father and his uncle, and we'd been banished to the outskirts like unwanted guests at our own family's celebration. From my seat, I had to crane my neck to see the head table. Jason and Clarissa sat in the center, flanked by Victoria and Charles on one side, and Clarissa's sister Emma and her husband on the other side. The best man and maid of honor were also at that table. 8 people total, and not one of them was related to the groom. Jason's father wasn't worthy of sitting with him at his own wedding reception. Dinner was served, some kind of fancy chicken dish with a sauce I couldn't identify, accompanied by roasted vegetables arranged artistically on the plate. It probably tasted good, but I could barely eat. My stomach was in knots. I pushed food around my plate and watched Jason at the head table, laughing at something Charles said, looking comfortable and happy in a world where I didn't belong. The woman next to me, Patricia, according to the place card, tried to make conversation. "How do you know the happy couple?" "I'm Jason's father." Her eyes widened in surprise, and she glanced toward the head table as if to confirm that the groom's father really wasn't seated there. "Oh, how nice. And Jason's mother?" "She passed away 8 years ago." "I'm so sorry." She looked genuinely uncomfortable now, probably realizing the social faux pas of the seating arrangement. "And you raised Jason alone?" "From the time he was 14, yes. Before that, we raised him together." "That must have been difficult. You must be very proud of him today." I wanted to say yes, that I was proud, but the truth was more complicated. I was proud of the boy I'd raised, kind, thoughtful, appreciative. But the man sitting at that head table, the one who'd excluded his father from every meaningful part of this wedding, I didn't know if I was proud of him at all. After dinner, Charles Montgomery stood to give the first toast. He tapped his champagne glass with a fork until the tent fell silent, then launched into a speech about Clarissa. How proud he was of his daughter. How accomplished she'd become as a lawyer. How she'd always had impeccable taste and excellent judgment. How he'd known from the moment she brought Jason home that he was special. Not from our usual circle, of course, but a good young man with potential. The condescension in that phrase made my blood boil. Not from our usual circle. Translation: not wealthy, not connected, not good enough. But acceptable because Clarissa had chosen him. Charles went on to talk about the life he envisioned for the newlyweds. Success, prosperity, beautiful grandchildren, a place in Portland society. He raised his glass. "To Jason and Clarissa, may they build a life as blessed as the one we've built for our family." Everyone applauded and drank. I lifted my glass to my lips but couldn't swallow. Everything about that toast had been about the Montgomerys, their values, their vision. Jason was just a supporting character in their family story. Next came Dave's speech. As he'd warned me, it was carefully sanitized. He talked about meeting Jason in college, about some safe, humorous anecdotes that had clearly been approved by Victoria. Nothing too personal, nothing that revealed too much about Jason's actual personality or past. He raised his glass to my friend Jason and his beautiful bride and sat down to polite applause. Then Emma, Clarissa's sister, stood and gave a speech about growing up with Clarissa, about their close relationship, about welcoming Jason into the Montgomery family. That phrase again, the Montgomery family, as if Jason's own family didn't exist or didn't matter. After Emma finished, the DJ announced that dinner would continue and dancing would begin shortly. That was it. No other speeches. No father of the groom toast. I'd been erased from the program as efficiently as I'd been erased from everything else. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the floor. The people at my table looked at me in surprise, but I didn't care. I walked toward the exit of the tent, needing air, needing space. I walked away from the noise and lights, toward the darker edges of the property where the manicured lawn gave way to natural landscaping. I could still hear the music starting inside the tent, could hear laughter and conversation, could hear the celebration continuing without me. I pulled out my phone and looked at the speech I'd written, still saved in my notes app. I read through it one more time, the stories about Jason as a boy, the tribute to Helen, the welcome to Clarissa, the hopes and dreams I had for their future. It was a good speech. It was heartfelt and genuine. It deserved to be heard, but it never would be. I'd been silenced. My role as Jason's father had been reduced to occupying a chair at table 18 and being grateful I'd been invited at all. "Dad?" I turned to see Jason walking toward me, loosening his bow tie. "What are you doing out here?" "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just needed some air." He stood next to me, hands in his pockets. "It's overwhelming in there, isn't it? All those people. I barely know half of them. They're all Clarissa's parents' friends." "Yes, I noticed that." We stood in silence for a moment. Then Jason said, "I saw you leave during the speeches." "You looked upset." "Did I? How surprising." I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. Dad, what's wrong? Are you mad at me? I turned to face him. Jason, I prepared a speech. A father of the groom toast. I worked on it for 2 weeks. I wanted to honor your mother's memory, to welcome Clarissa to our family, to tell you how proud I am of the man you've become. And I was cut from the program without even being consulted. Do you understand how that feels? He looked uncomfortable. I didn't know you'd prepared a speech. If I'd known, you should have known. Every father gives a toast at his son's wedding. It's traditional. It's expected. But you and Victoria decided I didn't fit into her perfect program. That's not fair. Victoria's just trying to make sure everything runs smoothly. And I'm just an obstacle to smooth running? Is that it? God forbid the groom's father from his modest background gives a speech that might remind everyone you didn't come from money. Jason's face flushed with anger. That's not what this is about. You're being unfair. I'm trying to make everyone happy. You, Clarissa, her parents. It's impossible to please everyone. You're not trying to make me happy, Jason. You haven't considered my feelings once throughout this entire process. I wasn't included in planning. I wasn't asked to walk you down the aisle. I'm seated at table 18 while strangers sit at the head table with you. I was cut from the speeches. I've been systematically erased from your wedding day, and you're acting like I'm being unreasonable for noticing. You're being dramatic. You're here, aren't you? You're at my wedding. That should be enough. Should it? Should I be grateful for being allowed to attend my own son's wedding like a distant acquaintance? My voice was rising now, months of suppressed hurt and anger finally breaking through. Do you have any idea how it felt to watch you walk down that aisle alone? To sit in the back of that tent while Victoria's family surrounds you? To listen to Charles talk about you like you're some charity case they've graciously accepted into their circle? He didn't say that. Yes, he did. Not from our usual circle, but a good young man with potential. That's what he said. And you sat there smiling like it was a compliment instead of an insult. Jason stepped back. I think you need to calm down. You're making this about you when it's supposed to be about me and Clarissa. That's exactly my point, Jason. This is supposed to be about you and Clarissa. But it's actually about Clarissa and the Montgomerys. You're a prop in their production, and they've decided I don't fit the aesthetic, so I've been removed from the picture. That's ridiculous. I'm not a prop, I'm the groom. This is my wedding too. Then act like it. Stand up for me. Insist that your father matters. Tell Victoria that you want me at the head table, that you want me to give a speech, that you want me treated like family instead of an embarrassment. He stared at me, jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might actually do it. Might actually choose me over the Montgomerys. But then he shook his head. I can't do that, Dad. Clarissa would be hurt. Her mother has worked so hard on this wedding. I can't just change everything now because you're feeling left out. Feeling left out. That's what he called it. Like I was a child complaining about not being picked for a team, not a father who'd been excluded from the most important day of his son's life. You know what your mother would say if she could see this? I said quietly. She'd be heartbroken. Not because of the fancy venue or the expensive flowers or any of that, but because of how you're treating me. Helen raised you better than this, or at least she tried to. Jason's eyes filled with tears. Don't bring Mom into this. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair, Jason. But you're right about one thing. This is your wedding. Your choice. You've chosen the Montgomerys and their money and their status over your own father. I just hope it's worth it. I turned and started walking toward the parking area. Behind me, I heard Jason call out, "Oh, Dad, wait. Don't leave, please. We can talk about this." But I kept walking. I was done talking, done explaining, done begging to be treated with basic dignity at my own son's wedding. Let him go back to his reception, to his new family, to the life he'd chosen. I clearly wasn't part of it. I found the valet, handed him my ticket, and waited for my old Honda Civic. When it arrived, the same valet who'd looked at it with disdain earlier now avoided my eyes entirely. He'd probably heard about the drama. News travels fast at events like these. I tipped him anyway, got in my car, and drove away from the Montgomery estate without looking back. The drive home was a blur. I kept replaying the conversation with Jason, kept hearing his words. You're being dramatic. Feeling left out. I can't change everything now. Not once had he said, "You're right, Dad. I'm sorry. I should have fought for you." Not once had he chosen me. When I got home, I sat in my driveway for a long time before going inside. This house, the modest 3-bedroom where I'd raised Jason alone after Helen died, suddenly felt very empty. I'd always told myself that someday it would be full again, Someday Jason would bring grandchildren to visit. Someday holidays would be loud and chaotic with family. But sitting there in the dark, I realized that future might never come. The Montgomerys would fill Jason's life now. His children would spend holidays at the estate. His wife's family would be the grandparents who mattered. I was obsolete. My role was finished. Inside, I poured myself a whiskey, something I rarely did, and sat in my recliner. I pulled out my phone and reread my speech one more time. Then I did something impulsive. I posted it on Facebook. The whole thing, exactly as I'd written it, with a simple caption, "The father of the groom speech I wasn't allowed to give at my son's wedding today." I knew it was petty. I knew it might cause problems. But I'd been silenced all day, and I wasn't going to be silent anymore. People needed to know what had happened. Jason needed to know that I wasn't going to just accept being erased. Within minutes, comments started appearing. Friends from church expressing shock and sympathy. Former colleagues from my teaching days saying how beautiful the speech was. Helen's relatives saying she would have been furious about my treatment. My brother Earl commented simply, "About damn time you stood up for yourself." My phone started ringing. "Jason." I declined the call. It rang again. Declined. A text message appeared. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Take down that post. Now. You're embarrassing me." Embarrassing him. After everything that had happened today, after all the ways I'd been humiliated, he was worried about being embarrassed. I turned off my phone and went to bed. The next morning, I woke to discover my Facebook post had gone viral. It had been shared hundreds of times. Local news outlets had picked it up. By noon, a reporter from the Oregonian was calling my landline asking for an interview. "We're doing a story on wedding etiquette and family dynamics. We'd love to get your perspective." I declined the interview. This wasn't about getting attention or making Jason look bad. It was about telling my truth, about refusing to be silent about my pain. But the story ran anyway, with screenshots of my post and quotes from etiquette experts weighing in on whether I'd been treated inappropriately. The consensus seemed to be yes, excluding the father of the groom from speeches and relegating him to a back table was a significant breach of wedding etiquette and basic decency. My phone filled with voicemails and text messages. Most were supportive, friends and acquaintances and even strangers reaching out to say they understood, they sympathized, they'd experienced similar treatment from their own children. But there were also angry messages. From Victoria Montgomery, threatening legal action if I didn't take down the post. From some of Clarissa's friends, calling me a bitter old man trying to ruin a young couple's happiness. And from Jason, pleading with me to please take it down before it caused more damage. But the most heartbreaking message came 3 days after the wedding. It was an email from Jason, and it was long and detailed and coldly formal. "Dad, I've tried calling multiple times, but you won't answer, so I'm writing this instead. What you did was unforgivable. Clarissa is devastated. Her mother is threatening to cut us off financially. My new wife is crying every day because you turned our wedding into a public spectacle. You humiliated us in front of our friends and family. You made our special day about you and your hurt feelings instead of about our happiness. I understand you were disappointed about the speech. I get that you felt left out of some planning decisions. But airing our private family business on social media for the world to see, that's cruel and vindictive. That's not the father I thought you were. Clarissa doesn't want me to have contact with you right now. She says you're toxic and manipulative and that you'll try to sabotage our marriage. I told her you're not like that you're just hurt and you acted impulsively. But honestly, Dad, I'm starting to wonder if she's right. The man who wrote that Facebook post isn't someone I recognize. I need some space. We both do. Please don't call or text or try to contact me. When Clarissa is ready, when I'm ready, we'll reach out. But right now, we need to focus on starting our marriage without your drama overshadowing everything. I hope you understand. Actually, I don't care if you understand. This is what's happening. Jason, I read that email 10 times. Each time it hurt more. My son was cutting me off. Not because I'd done something terrible to him, but because I'd finally stood up for myself. Because I'd refused to be silenced. Because I'd told the truth about how I'd been treated. Victoria was threatening to cut them off financially. That was the real issue, I realized. Jason wasn't angry because I'd hurt his feelings. He was angry because I'd threatened his access to the Montgomery money. His new comfortable lifestyle depended on keeping Clarissa's parents happy, and I was making that difficult. Earl came over that evening. He found me sitting in the dark, Helen's wedding photo in my hands. Jesus, Ricky, you look like hell. Jason's cut me off. Says I'm toxic and manipulative. Says I sabotaged his wedding. Earl sat down heavily. The Facebook post? The Facebook post. The truth, in other words. I told the truth about what happened, and now I'm the villain. You're not the villain. You're a father who was treated like garbage and finally said something about it. That doesn't make you toxic. That makes you human. Clarissa's convinced him I'm trying to destroy their marriage. Victoria's threatening to cut them off financially if they stay in contact with me. Jason's choosing them, just like I knew he would. Earl was quiet for a long moment. Maybe that's not the worst thing. I looked at him in surprise. What? Maybe Jason needs to learn what happens when you choose money over family. When you let your in-laws dictate your relationships. When you prioritize status over the people who actually love you. Maybe he needs to lose you to understand what he had. Or maybe he'll never understand. Maybe to him I really am just a burden from his past that he's better off without. Then he's a fool. And you deserve better than a son who treats you like that. We sat in silence. Two old men who'd both learned painful lessons about family and loyalty and the ways people you love can hurt you. Finally, Earl said, "What are you going to do?" I don't know. Wait, I guess. Hope that Jason comes to his senses. Hope that eventually he'll realize what he's thrown away. And if he doesn't, I looked at Helen's photo again. Then I'll learn to live with it. I survived losing her. I can survive losing him too. But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. Losing Helen had been devastating, but it hadn't been her choice. She'd fought to stay with me, with Jason, with the life we'd built. She'd died against her will. But Jason was choosing to leave. Choosing the Montgomerys over me. Choosing money and status over his own father. And that hurt in ways I couldn't even begin to articulate. 3 months passed without a word from Jason. 3 months of silence that felt like a death. Except the person I was mourning was still alive, just choosing not to acknowledge my existence. I went through the motions of daily life, grocery shopping, doctor's appointments, coffee with Earl, but everything felt muted, colorless, like I was watching my own life from a distance. The Facebook post eventually died down, though it lived on in screenshots and shares. I took it down after 2 weeks, not because Jason asked me to, but because I'd said what I needed to say, and keeping it up felt like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. Some people called me brave. Others called me bitter. I didn't care about either assessment. I just wanted my son back. Father Murphy from St. Mary's, where Helen and I had been married, where Jason had been baptized, reached out and invited me for coffee. We met at a small cafe near the church, and he listened patiently as I poured out the whole story. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "Richard, may I ask you something? When you posted that speech, what did you hope would happen?" "I don't know. I just needed people to know the truth. I needed Jason to understand how much he hurt me. And has he? Has he come to understand?" "No. He thinks I tried to sabotage his wedding. He's cut me out of his life completely." Father Murphy nodded. "Let me tell you something I've learned in 40 years of counseling parishioners. The truth can be a weapon or a tool. When we speak truth in anger, to wound or punish, it becomes a weapon that often hurts us as much as the person we're aiming at. But when we speak truth in love, seeking understanding rather than vindication, it becomes a tool for healing. I wasn't trying to punish him. I was just tired of being invisible. I believe you. But intent and impact aren't always the same. You made your pain public when it should have been private. You involved the world in a family matter. And now Jason feels exposed, humiliated, forced to defend choices he might have already been questioning privately. So I should have just stayed silent, let them treat me like garbage and said nothing? No, you should have confronted Jason directly, privately, with love and firmness. You should have set boundaries. You should have demanded respect. But you should have done it in a way that left room for reconciliation. Public shaming rarely leads to healing, Richard. It usually just creates more walls. His words stung because they held truth I didn't want to acknowledge. I'd been hurt and angry, and I'd lashed out in the most public way possible. Had I destroyed any chance of repairing my relationship with Jason? As if reading my mind, Father Murphy said, "It's not too late. Pride is what keeps families apart, Richard. Your pride, Jason's pride, the Montgomerys' pride. Someone has to be willing to set pride aside and reach out, to apologize not for feeling hurt, but for how you expressed that hurt. To build a bridge even when you're not the one who burned it down." I left that meeting with a lot to think about. Was Father Murphy right? Should I apologize? Part of me resisted. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'd been treated terribly, and I'd spoken up about it. Why should I apologize for that? But another part of me recognized the wisdom in his words. I didn't want to be right more than I wanted my son back. I didn't want to win an argument more than I wanted to be part of Jason's life. Maybe swallowing my pride and reaching out was the only path forward. That night, I sat down and wrote Jason a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter on the good stationery Helen had kept for special occasions. I wrote and rewrote it a dozen times, trying to find the right words. Dear Jason, 3 months have passed since your wedding, and not a day goes by that I don't think about you and wish things had gone differently. I've had a lot of time to reflect on what happened, and I want to say some things that I should have said in private rather than on social media. First, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for posting that speech publicly. I was hurt and angry, and I made a choice that caused you and Clarissa pain and embarrassment. That wasn't my intention, but I understand that impact matters more than intention. I should have come to you directly. Should have had a private conversation about how I was feeling instead of airing our family business to the world. However, I also need you to understand that the pain I expressed in that post was real. I felt excluded from your wedding in ways that cut deeply. Not being part of the planning, not walking you down the aisle, being seated far from you, having my speech cut without discussion. All of those things made me feel like I didn't matter. Like I was an embarrassment to be hidden away. I don't know if the Montgomerys deliberately excluded me or if it just happened that way, but the result was the same. I felt invisible at one of the most important days of both our lives, and that hurt more than I can adequately express. I understand that you're building a life with Clarissa, that her family is important to you, that you want to honor her wishes and maintain peace with her parents. I respect that. Marriage requires compromise and sometimes difficult choices. But I hope you can understand that my feelings also deserve consideration. That being your father means something, even if it's not as impressive as being a Montgomery. I miss you, son. I miss our phone calls, our dinners together, our relationship. I don't want the rest of our lives to be defined by one painful day and one impulsive social media post. You're my only child. You're all I have left of your mother. I don't want to lose you over this. I'm not asking you to choose between me and Clarissa or between me and her family. I'm just asking for a place in your life, some acknowledgement that I matter, some recognition that the 33 years I spent raising you count for something. If you're willing, I'd like to meet for coffee. Just the two of us. No agendas, no demands, just a father and son trying to find their way back to each other. But if you're not ready yet, I understand. I'll be here when you are. I love you. I always have and I always will. Nothing will ever change that. Dad, I mailed the letter and then waited. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. No response. I checked my phone constantly, checked my email, checked my mailbox. Nothing. Either Jason hadn't received the letter, unlikely, or he'd received it and chosen not to respond. Earl told me to give it time, that Jason probably needed to process everything. Father Murphy said to be patient, that healing takes longer than hurting. But with each passing day of silence, my hope faded a little more. Then, 6 weeks after I sent the letter, my phone rang at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday evening. Jason's name appeared on the screen. My heart started racing. I let it ring twice more before answering, trying to steady my voice. Hello? Dad, it's Jason. His voice sounded tired, strained. I got your letter. Actually, I got it weeks ago. I've been trying to figure out what to say. I'm glad you called. My hand was shaking so badly I had to press the phone hard against my ear to keep it steady. I've been thinking a lot. About the wedding, about what happened, about everything you wrote. And I talked to Clarissa. Really talked to her, maybe for the first time about this whole situation. I held my breath, waiting. You were right about some things. You were treated poorly. The seating arrangement was wrong. That was Victoria's doing, and I should have noticed and changed it. The speech thing was wrong too. I should have insisted you be included. I let Clarissa's family steamroll over everything and I didn't speak up for you when I should have. Relief flooded through me. Thank you for saying that. But Dad, the Facebook post, that really hurt. Clarissa cried for days. Her parents were furious. It made our first weeks as a married couple absolutely miserable. That wasn't fair to us, I know. I'm sorry. I was wrong to do it that way. I understand why you did it. I do. But understanding doesn't make it okay. He paused. Clarissa doesn't want me to see you. She thinks you're toxic, that you'll always cause problems in our marriage. Her parents have been in her ear constantly telling her that you're trying to control me, that you're jealous of their relationship with us. My heart sank. And what do you think? I think, he sighed heavily, I think everyone's messed up here. You were hurt and you lashed out. Clarissa's family was controlling and dismissive. I was weak and didn't stand up for you. And now we're all dug into our positions and nobody wants to be the first to back down. I'm backing down, Jason. I apologized. I'm trying to make this right, I know, and I appreciate that. But Clarissa, she's not there yet. She's still really angry. And honestly, her parents are threatening to cut us off if I reconcile with you. They're paying our rent, Dad. They helped me get my current job through Charles's connections. We're financially dependent on them. If they cut us off, we're screwed. There was. The truth laid bare. Jason's relationship with me had a price tag, and the Montgomerys were holding the purse strings. So you're choosing their money over your father. It's not that simple. Clarissa and I are trying to build a life together. We have bills, we have obligations. I can't just throw away our financial security because you and her parents don't get along. I'm not asking you to throw anything away. I'm asking you to be my son, to let me be part of your life. That doesn't cost the Montgomerys a dime, but it costs me, Dad. It costs me peace in my marriage. It costs me Clarissa's trust. It costs me my relationship with her family. Everything has a cost. I felt something inside me harden. You're right. Everything does have a cost. And you're learning what it costs to sell your integrity. What it costs to let other people control your life with money. What it costs to treat your own father like he's disposable. That's not fair. Life isn't fair, Jason. I learned that when your mother died and I had to raise you alone. When I worked 2 jobs to pay for your college. When I sacrificed my own dreams to make sure you had opportunities. And now I'm learning it again as I watch my son choose a comfortable lifestyle over his own father. So what do you want me to do? Defy Clarissa? Tell her parents to go to hell? Destroy my marriage to make you happy? I want you to be a man. I want you to set boundaries with your in-laws. I want you to tell your wife that your father deserves respect. I want you to build a life that isn't entirely dependent on the Montgomerys' money. I want you to stand on your own 2 feet instead of being a puppet with the Montgomerys pulling the strings. Jason's voice rose. I'm trying my best here, Dad. I'm trying to balance everything. Why can't you understand that? Because there shouldn't be a balance, Jason. I'm your father. That should mean something. That should be non-negotiable. But you've made it negotiable. You've put me on one side of a scale and the Montgomerys' money on the other, and I'm losing. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Jason said quietly, maybe I need more time. Maybe we both do. This call isn't going anywhere good. Wait, don't hang up, please. Can we at least meet for coffee? Just once, just to see each other face to face? Another pause. I'll think about it. I'll talk to Clarissa. But I'm not promising anything. That's all I'm asking. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. The conversation had gone better than I'd feared, but worse than I'd hoped. Jason acknowledged I'd been wronged, but he wasn't willing to do anything about it. He was trapped, or believed he was trapped, by his financial dependence on the Montgomerys. And as long as that dependence existed, I would always come second. 2 weeks after that phone call, Jason texted me, "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? 10 a.m. at Bernie's?" Bernie's was a small cafe halfway between my house and his apartment. Neutral territory. I responded immediately. I'll be there. I arrived 15 minutes early, nervous in a way I hadn't been since my first date with Helen. This was my son, the boy I'd raised, but it felt like meeting a stranger. I ordered coffee and sat at a corner table, watching the door. Jason arrived exactly on time. He looked tired, older somehow than he had at the wedding. He got his own coffee and sat down across from me, and for a moment we just looked at each other. "Thanks for coming," I said finally. "Thanks for suggesting it." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "This has been the worst few months of my life, Dad. Clarissa and I have been fighting constantly. Her parents are always in our business. I feel like I'm drowning. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Or are you thinking I deserve it for how I treated you?" The honest answer was complicated. Part of me did think he deserved to struggle, to face consequences for his choices. But the larger part, the father part, just hurt for him. "I don't want you to be unhappy, Jason. Even when you've hurt me, I've never wanted that." He nodded slowly. "I know, that's what makes this so hard. You've always wanted what's best for me, and I repaid that by treating you like garbage at my wedding." "Yes, you did. I've been doing a lot of thinking. About Mom, actually. About what she would say if she could see how I've been acting. And I think she'd be ashamed of me. His voice cracked on the last words, and I saw tears in his eyes. Your mother would be disappointed in the choices you made, but she'd never stop loving you. Neither will I. How can you say that after everything I've done? Because you're my son. That doesn't change based on your behavior. It doesn't have conditions or expiration dates. You're my son, period. Even when you hurt me, even when you choose other people over me, even when you make terrible decisions, you're still my son and I still love you. Jason wiped his eyes. I don't deserve that. Love isn't about deserving. Your mother taught me that. When she was dying, she made me promise to always be there for you, no matter what, to love you unconditionally, even when it's hard. Even when you make it hard. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Jason said, Clarissa doesn't want me here right now. She doesn't know I'm meeting you. When I told her I wanted to see you, we had a huge fight. She said I was choosing you over her, that I was betraying our marriage. Her mother called me and spent an hour telling me what a mistake it would be to reconnect with you. But you came anyway. Yeah, I came anyway, because I realized something. If I can't see my own father without permission from my wife and her parents, then I'm not really a man. I'm a child playing at being an adult. Hope flickered in my chest. What are you saying, Jason? I'm saying you were right. About me being dependent on them. About letting them control my life. About being weak. I've been so focused on having the lifestyle they can provide, the nice apartment, the career connections, the social status, that I forgot who I was. I forgot where I came from. I forgot what really matters. Those are good realizations. But what are you going to do about them? He took a deep breath. I'm going to get a different job, one I find on my own, not through Charles's connections. Clarissa and I are going to move to a cheaper apartment, one we can actually afford without her parents' help. We're going to build a life that belongs to us, not one that's been purchased for us. And Clarissa agrees with this. He hesitated. Not yet, but she will, because I'm going to insist on it. I'm going to be a husband, not a puppet. And if she can't accept that, if she can't accept that my father is part of my life and always will be, then he couldn't finish the sentence. But I understood what he was saying. Jason, I don't want to cause problems in your marriage. I don't want you to choose between me and Clarissa. I just want to be treated with basic respect. I want to be part of your life in a meaningful way, not hidden away like an embarrassment. I know. And you will be. I promise. It's going to take time. This is going to be hard for her. She's not used to not getting her way. Her family isn't used to being told no. But I have to do this. For me, for us, for any future kids we might have. I don't want to raise children who think money is more important than family, who think it's okay to treat people poorly if they're not wealthy or connected. That sounds like the Jason I raised, the boy I always believed you could be. I lost my way, Dad. I got seduced by the lifestyle, by the money, by being part of the Montgomery world. It felt good to not be the poor kid anymore, to not worry about money, to have access to things I never had growing up. But the cost was too high. I gave up my integrity. I gave up my relationship with you. I gave up myself. We talked for 3 hours. About the wedding, about everything that had gone wrong, about how to move forward. Jason apologized, really apologized, taking full responsibility for his choices. I apologized, too, for the Facebook post, for handling my pain in a public way that hurt him and Clarissa. When we finally left the cafe, Jason hugged me. A real hug, tight and long like he used to give me when he was a boy. I love you, Dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to remember what that means. I love you too, son. Welcome home. The months that followed weren't easy. Jason did change jobs, taking a position with less prestige and a lower salary, but one he'd earned on his own merit. He and Clarissa moved to a smaller apartment in a less fashionable neighborhood. The Montgomerys were furious. Victoria stopped speaking to Clarissa for 2 months. Charles threatened to disinherit her, but Jason held firm. He told Clarissa that he needed to be his own man, that their life together couldn't be controlled by her parents' money. She struggled with it. Years of being Daddy's little princess don't disappear overnight, but slowly she began to understand. When her parents threatened to cut her off, she called their bluff. Fine, cut me off. Jason and I will figure it out ourselves. They didn't cut her off, of course. Victoria couldn't stand the thought of her daughter living in a modest apartment, working a regular job, being, horror of horrors, middle class. But the threat lost its power once Clarissa stopped being afraid of it. Jason and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully. Coffee once a week, dinner at my house once a month. Phone calls just to talk, not because anyone needed anything, Real conversations about his life, his struggles, his hopes. He started asking about Helen, about what she'd been like, wanting to remember and honor the mother he'd lost too young. Clarissa and I had a more complicated relationship. She'd been raised to see people like me, middle class, modest means, working professionals, as somehow lesser. Breaking through that conditioning took time, but she tried. She apologized for the wedding for how I'd been treated. She admitted that her mother had pushed for my exclusion, that she'd gone along with it, because she'd always gone along with whatever her parents wanted. I've never had to be strong before, she told me one evening when she and Jason came for dinner. My parents always fixed everything, always smoothed over every problem. But Jason's teaching me that real strength isn't having someone else solve your problems. It's solving them yourself even when it's hard. 8 months after that coffee shop reconciliation, Jason called me with news. "Dad, Clarissa's pregnant. You're going to be a grandfather," I cried. Happy tears this time, not the tears of grief and loss I'd shed so many times over the past year. "That's wonderful news. Congratulations. We want you involved, Dad. Really involved. Not tucked away in a corner like at the wedding. We want you to be an important part of this baby's life. And we want to honor Mom too. If it's a girl, we're thinking about Helen as a middle name. If that's okay with you, your mother would love that. And so do I." The baby, a girl they named Emma Helen, was born 6 months later. I was at the hospital, one of the first people to hold her. She had Helen's eyes. Or maybe I just wanted to see Helen in her. Either way, holding my granddaughter, watching Jason as a father, seeing the way he looked at his daughter with such love and wonder, it healed something in me that I hadn't even realized was still broken. The Montgomerys came to visit at the hospital too. Victoria held Emma briefly, cooing appropriately, but there was a coolness there. She was still angry about Jason's declaration of independence, still resentful that her daughter had chosen a modest life over the luxury she'd been raised with. Charles barely looked at the baby, too busy taking business calls in the hallway. "They'll come around eventually," Clarissa said, watching her parents with sad eyes. "Or they won't. Either way, we'll be okay." She was right. Whether the Montgomerys accepted their new reality or not didn't matter anymore. Jason and Clarissa had built something real, something that belonged to them. It wasn't as flashy or impressive as the life the Montgomerys had envisioned. But it was authentic. It was earned. It was theirs. A year after Emma was born, Jason and Clarissa invited me to Sunday dinner at their apartment. Still modest, still not fancy, but warm and full of life. Emma was toddling around, babbling constantly, bringing me toys to inspect and approve. We ate spaghetti and garlic bread, nothing gourmet, just simple food shared with love. After Emma was in bed, the three of us sat on their small couch, drinking wine and talking. "Dad," Jason said, "I need to tell you something. I've been in therapy, working through a lot of stuff about money and status and the choices I made. That's good. I'm proud of you for doing that work. My therapist had me write letters. One to you, one to Clarissa, one to myself. I want to read you mine, if that's okay." I nodded, and he pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Dear Dad, I'm writing this to acknowledge the harm I caused, and to understand why I did it. For years I was embarrassed by our circumstances. Not by you, never by you, but by the fact that we didn't have much money. I watched my friends from wealthy families, and I wanted what they had. I wanted the nice cars and the vacation homes and the sense of security that comes from never worrying about bills. When I met Clarissa and her family, I thought I'd found the golden ticket. A way into that world I'd always envied. And I was so desperate to belong there, so afraid they'd reject me if they really knew where I came from, that I tried to hide you. I tried to minimize you. I tried to pretend my past was something other than what it was. At the wedding, I let the Montgomerys erase you because I was afraid. Afraid that if they saw too much of you, they'd see me, the real me, the middle-class kid who didn't belong in their world. I thought I was protecting myself, but I was really just betraying everything you'd taught me. You raised me to value character over possessions, integrity over image, love over money. But I forgot all of that. I chose status and comfort over the man who sacrificed everything for me, and I'm ashamed of that choice every single day. I can't undo the wedding. I can't take back the hurt I caused. But I can commit to being better, to being the man you raised me to be, to teaching Emma the values you taught me, the ones I temporarily forgot, to building a life based on what matters, not on what impresses. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for loving me even when I didn't deserve it. Thank you for being the father every son should have, but not every son appreciates. I love you. Dad, I'm sorry it took me so long to show it properly. Jason. By the time he finished reading, we were all crying. Clarissa reached over and squeezed my hand. He's right about everything. And I'm sorry too, for treating you like you weren't important, for letting my parents control everything, for caring more about impressing people than about doing what's right. We all made mistakes, I said. What matters is that we learned from them, that we're here now, together, building something better. That night, driving home through quiet streets, I thought about Helen, about the promise I'd made to her to always be there for Jason, about the years of doubt when I'd wondered if I'd failed him, if I'd lost him forever to the seductive pull of wealth and status, but I hadn't lost him. He'd lost himself for a while, but he'd found his way back. And in doing so, he'd become the man Helen and I had always hoped he'd be. Not perfect, none of us are perfect, but good, genuine, principled, a man who knew what mattered and was willing to fight for it. 5 years have passed since that terrible wedding day. Emma is 6 now, and there's a baby brother, Henry Robert, named after both his grandfathers. Jason's career has progressed steadily, earning promotions through hard work rather than connections. Clarissa practices family law at a small firm that helps low-income families, finding more satisfaction in meaningful work than she ever found in her parents' society events. The Montgomerys are still around, still wealthy, still disappointed that their daughter chose authenticity over luxury, but they've softened somewhat. Victoria actually apologized to me last Christmas, a stiff, formal apology that probably cost her considerable pride. Charles and I will never be close, but we're civil. We can be in the same room for our grandchildren's sake. As for me, I'm 74 now, retired and content. I see Jason and his family every week. I'm Grandpa Rick to Emma and Henry, the grandfather who plays games and reads stories and spoils them in modest, meaningful ways. I'm part of their lives not because I bought my way in, but because I belong there. Because family isn't about money or status or impressive weddings. It's about showing up. It's about loving people through their mistakes. It's about standing firm in your values, even when it costs you. Sometimes I think about that Facebook post, about the speech I never gave at the wedding. I don't regret writing the speech. I don't even regret my feelings. But I understand now what Father Murphy tried to tell me, that public shaming is never the path to healing. That real change comes from private conversations, from setting boundaries with love, from giving people room to grow even when they've hurt you. Jason and I laugh about it sometimes now. Remember when I was such an entitled jerk that you had to call me out on social media? He'll say. Remember when I was so devastated that I responded by going viral? I'll reply. The pain has faded enough that we can joke about it, can acknowledge how badly we both handled things, can appreciate how far we've come. Last month, Emma asked me about her grandmother, Helen. What was Grandma like? She wanted to know. I pulled out the old photo albums and told her stories. About how Helen and I met, about our simple but perfect wedding, about how she'd wanted nothing more than to be a mother, and how Jason had been her whole world. About how she'd fought so hard to stay alive, to see him grow up, but cancer had taken her too soon. Do you think she'd be proud of Daddy? Emma asked. Yes, sweetheart. She'd be very proud. Not because of his job or his house or anything like that, but because he's a good man, a good father, a good husband, a good son. That's what Grandma cared about. That's what really matters. Emma nodded seriously, processing this. Then she asked, would she be proud of you too, Grandpa? The question surprised me. Would Helen be proud of me for almost losing our son to greed and status? For handling my pain in a way that caused more harm? For the mistakes I made along the way? But then I thought about it differently. Helen would be proud that I fought for my relationship with Jason, that I set boundaries and demanded respect, that I loved him enough to let him stumble and fall and find his own way back, that I kept the promise I made to her, to always be there for our son, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Yes, I told Emma, I think she would be proud. Not because I did everything perfectly, but because I never gave up on the people I love. That's the truth I've learned through all of this. Love isn't about grand gestures or expensive weddings or impressing other people. Love is about showing up day after day. It's about setting boundaries when necessary and extending grace when possible. It's about remembering what matters when the world tries to convince you that other things matter more. My name is Richard Walsh. I'm 74 years old. I was humiliated at my son's wedding, lost him for months, and almost lost him forever. But I got him back, not because of anything I did right, but because real love, the kind Helen and I built, the kind I tried to model for Jason, is resilient enough to survive even the worst mistakes. And that's worth more than all the Montgomery money in the world.